I would like to thank you all for joining us today. I'm really delighted to have you with us and looking forward for what the session will bring on. Uh, First, I'm Jana Al Obeidyine. I'm the founding editor of A Dance Mag. And it's been a while since we've published an issue, and we are preparing to publish 2 new issues this year. So I thought it would be nice to get together with, the community of the magazine and chat and look back and see what's been done and how um, we can move forward, like building on what we have, and also listen to your opinions and thoughts about the magazine, how it was for you as an experience, how you'd like it to be in the future, what do you think is missing, what do you think it's covered, what makes it different, what makes it interesting for you. That will be a very interesting conversation, I guess, to have before we move forward. So in order to do so, I decided to invite Abby, who we've met. Yes, this is Abby. Abby and I connected back in 2018. I had just launched the magazine, and she was at the time doing her PhD on periodical studies. And she was interested in corporality, so the magazine ended up being a core element of her research. So she's someone, and she remained a reader. So she is someone who knows the magazine very well without being, involved in the process of the making of the magazine. So I thought her perspective on the magazine would be helpful for both of us to moderate what we know as a team, and what you know as readers. We are joined also by Şebnem and Gabriel, who are both writers, contributors to the first issue, Transcendence, and who are now editors on the upcoming issue, Structure and Flow. Şebnem is a professor of theater studies in Turkey, and Gabriel is doing a second PhD. He's joining us from Brazil, and Şebnem is joining us from Turkey. Gabriel is doing a second PhD now on also transnational queer movement for the Palestinian liberation. So I will leave the floor now for Abby, so she can moderate this talk among us all, like as a group. Abby, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Abby. I'm from the US, but I'm coming to you today from Germany. And my PhD studies were also in Germany at the time that I started reading a dance magazine. So I remember very vividly, I really just kind of stumbled across a dance mag, and I showed it to my professor, and I was like, oh my gosh, this periodical is really, really cool. And I emailed Jana and I was like, hey, can you kind of clue me in to what's happening here? It's like, what is this publication? And I kind of would like to bookend the 5 sessions with a very simple question, which is basically what is the aspiration for the magazine? And I'm hoping over the next 3 issues or the next 3 sessions to really kind of engage with everybody who's here from a reader and a writer and an editor perspective, not only about content, but also kind of about the materiality and maybe even the spirituality behind the magazine that really has kind of built this community that brought us together here today, and to see what we can, or what Jana, what the whole team, everybody who is involved with this project can do with it and where it can go. So thank you everybody for being here. I think it's really, really cool that we all came together today. Me and Jana were talking also in the preparations for the sessions that we really don't want this to be kind of like a frontal kind of assault, if you will. We really want everybody to be involved and to really give your perspectives and your opinions, your critical eye, and maybe even your emotional eye, and to just really see, what we can build. So please unmute yourselves if you have something to say, or if you raise your hand. I don't know if you can do it literally, or there's not that many of us, or you can use the emoji. Cling in and out, turn on your cameras, turn on your mics, and really looking forward to talking with everybody over the next 5 weeks. So first, I kind of want to throw it back to Şebnem and Jana and Gabriel. And I really want to give you guys the platform for just a minute to take us back to 2018. Start with Jana, maybe, since this is, your project, and kind of looking at the forward to the transcendence issue and the very last part of the issue where you talk about going back to or being in Norway and kind of the seeds that were planted. So maybe if you can take us back for a second, kind of take us back to 2016, 17, 18. How did we get here? What was the inspiration? You talk a lot about politics, a lot about dance as being the antidote to war, your project in Norway, your master's. So please, how did we get here? What is a dance?
That's an
What is
interesting
its soul?
question. Yeah, well, yes, that's precisely where the seeds were planted, I guess. It was during my MA studies in dance anthropology. Şebnem and I were in the same cohort. It was an international program for dance studies, where the cohort was made from 16 people coming really from 15 countries around the world. And each of us was bringing their understanding of dance, also their practices. And during this period, like 2 years period, we traveled together, we lived together, and we danced together, we studied together. And I really, at that moment, I decided that, yes, dance is much more than performance. Like, performance is great. I'm a performer. I have always been a performer. So I love the stage. But dance can't be reduced just to performance. Dance is an aspect, is a really very important aspect of our lives and our daily lives. Like, we kind of pushed it away for some reason in some cultures, but in other cultures it's still very much alive in their daily life. So dance is a huge word, and no one is looking at it this way. Like, if you look at any dance magazine that is published today or for the last 20 years, you'll notice that dance is approached as a performance. Even in a contemporary context as a practice, it's still a performative art. So it's seen as a performative art, but dance has other meanings too. And I wanted to highlight this. I wanted to highlight the expansiveness of dance, and that it serves so many purposes, and it has so many functions, and it's our language, as our primary language. And how can this be talked about outside the norms, outside what we think of dance? And this is how I decided to start a magazine. Also, I was also frustrated with the academic context as well, since like writing about dance in an academic way is kind of isolated from the public discourse. Like, people can't really access academic texts because of their language primarily. Like, they are written in a way that isolate the ordinary reader. And yeah, so the discussion is kind of closed up. When dance is discussed as a big aspect of our lives, it's discussed in a way that is not accessible for everyone. And other than that, the mainstream showcase dance as ballet mainly, or contemporary dance, and this is it. Like, there is nothing outside these two forms of dance. So I thought a magazine would be a good way to bring this liveliness and this expansiveness and this diversity into the discussion, And this is precisely where the magazine the idea of the magazine started to form.
Okay, that's a really natural segue. I just have one more small question, and then I will go to Şebnem and Gabriel, and then try and open it up a little. Speaking of academics and academic contexts, is it a magazine or is it a journal? Is there a difference? Is there a distinction? Is it important if we're talking about opening to a bigger public? And how would you position yourself? And how did you manage or want to position yourself in the one or the other to make it and kind of accentuate that accessibility?
Yeah, well, I think it was important for it not to be a journal. And that was a discussion during the process of naming the magazine. What do we call it? A journal came out as a natural suggestion. And it was very clear to me that I didn't want this publication to be a journal. It's a magazine. It's a magazine that anybody can read and actually enjoy. Now, there are challenges in that sometimes, the editing process is a very long process for many reasons. I don't want to get into them all now, but it is a magazine. What I wanted it to be a magazine, something that anyone can read, understand, and hopefully enjoy too. Yes, sometimes the texts are a bit more complex than an ordinary magazine, but I guess they are accessible. I don't know if I answered the question. Did I?
I think you did. For me, you did.
Okay,
as far
good.
as I'm concerned. But I'll take the question and throw it first to Şebnem. How did you get involved? How did you end up being one of the contributors to the first issue? And why did you specifically decide to write about Horon?
Yeah, so we graduated in 2014, these 16 people in Korea Mundus program, and Jana went back to Beirut and I went back to Ankara to continue my PhD, and everybody was around the world. So we were in some kind of connection, and I was very much into academic world. And Jana told me that I have a surprise, which is coming soon. And she told me, I was wondering what it was, maybe a performance, a dance project or something. And it turned out that it was a magazine, a dance magazine. I was a little bit surprised. And then she invited me to write something on the first issue. And I was interested. The theme was Transcendence. And at that point, I completed my PhD, and it was very much related with Sufism and its relation to theater studies and so on. But I didn't want to write about it because I already wrote about it a lot. And when we think about transcendence, we always think about something religious or spiritual or something, which is directly linked to spiritualism or religion. But I decided to write something about joy. So I pick up my MA studies, Horon. It's a chain dance in Black Sea region, which is specific to Black Sea region. And it's a very joyful and vibrant dance. And I wanted to reflect upon this idea that with joy also, not only with serenity or solemnity, but also with joy, you can connect something transcendent. So I decided to write about Horon. And I wrote my text today. It was 7 or 6 years ago, I guess. And I partly forgot about it. And so I was thinking like, okay, it is not very academically speaking language. Is this really me? And I was like also, oh, did I already lose this after spending too many time in the academia? Oh, did I lose this language now? So because I didn't write something for the new issues. So it was like, it was about my experience and my sincere thoughts about my experience. Kind of a little bit speculating, maybe, because it's not the academic world, and I want also make the voice of the people who do this dance be known and be uttered in the world. So this is my kind of story. And so I sent a draft, and we worked on it, and then we published it.
Okay. Gabriel, same question to you. How did you get here? And especially Derrida, ketamine, and techno are three big concepts. How did you marry those, and how did it end up in a dance mag?
I was actually invited to write a text by Ibrahim Neame, who he was one of the co-founders, right, Jana? And who's a friend of mine, and who also had another magazine called The Outpost, a brilliant magazine. And he invited me to write a text about dance for a magazine, and I was writing a PhD. I've always written academically, right? And also dance wasn't really a topic. I do political science, international relations. And also at the time I was doing a PhD in Arabic literature. But dance has been something very present in my life through many ways. And I was, at the time, I had just moved to Berlin. I actually went to a conference in Berlin that was supposed to last 2 days, and I ended up staying 5 years. And what I was looking for when I went, because a friend of mine took me to a Berlin party, and I was like, "Oh my God, what's this? There's something there that I need to explore." So I picked up my stuff. I sublet my apartment in Paris, and I just moved to Berlin. And I would go to those parties and dance for like 3 days straight, right? And I don't know what I was looking for, but I needed to be there. And then but him invited me to write a text, but I didn't really have any idea. So I ended up saying that I ended up declining the invitation. And then later on Epiphany Day, I had that epiphany I talk about in the text, and they gave me an extra month to write about it. So it was a time where everything was flowing in such a particular way. I was even thinking about this the other day, of like how it was such a precious time, and I don't think I realized it at a time. I could actually, things were, when things are all connecting. So that's and it was also a challenge to write in a non-academic way. I even say that in the text, like I'll try to talk about it, and I'll embarrass myself in the process, which is actually a reference to a mistranslation of Derrida's the grammatology, because when he says in French, when you say s'embarrasser de quelque chose, it's actually to get concerned, to be concerned with something. But Spivak, who was actually the Gayatri Spivak, who was the translator of Derrida to English, mistranslated that, and she said, "I'll embarrass myself in the process." But I like this mistranslation because it was very embarrassing, and reading it again is very embarrassing. And I think there's something very interesting, and I like the challenge of being embarrassed while writing. So yeah, I think that's the story, and I think that we also attract a lot of people who write academically, and we, throughout the editorial process, we often had to ask them to tone down the academic part and be a little bit have a little bit more fun with it, and be a little bit crazier, right? It was something we experienced several times.
I think that's a really, really good point, maybe to start asking all of our guests who are here to kind of chime in. The first issue, can I be kind of crass? Like, is the first issue embarrassing? Is the first issue exactly what it was supposed to be? Is the first issue, what's the reaction? What's the general maybe from Şebnem, Jana, and Gabriel, but also from the public, like what were your perceptions or your experiences of the perception? What was the reception? Yeah, how did Transcendence hit the world in 2018? How do we remember it?
Maybe Jana would like to start, or
yeah, Jana, you may start. I wanted to maybe give the audience just a minute to kind of, but Jana, please open for us. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I hope someone will answer this question from the audience. But if not, we can tweak it maybe. Does anyone has anything to add to what we were discussing? Maybe not everyone is actually familiar with Transcendence Issue because it was a long time ago and there are no copies available anymore. Does anyone has something to ask or add, or should we move on?
Okay. Oh, Corinne, yeah, please. Please introduce yourself and tell us where you're tuning in from.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm Corinne, and I'm now in Montreal, but I'm Lebanese. I'm doing my master's in dance. I've been part of the Lebanese dance scene for a long time. And I'll just moved to Montreal to finish my master's in dance. And I remember the 2018 was a very particular year for us in Lebanon. It was the last year where things were blooming. And I remember that Dance Mag, I think it was through Zena.
Zena Al Obeidyine.
Voilà. That I heard about it. Zena was taking one of my classes, and she said, "Corinne, would you like to contribute to the issue?" And I said, like, I think it was the second issue on contact. Anyways, like
that's the third issue.
The third issue, yeah.
Actually, your name showed up in the third issue.
Okay,
you know that.
I think through Yanni, right?
Yes, through Yanni, exactly.
So, I mean, at first I was super excited because I felt that in my process back then, I felt I needed the industry of dance to be a little bit more complete, in the sense that it's not just dance classes, but it's people who think about dance and write about dance. And I felt that this was brilliant. That was my first encounter with the magazine. And then I was not able to know where the magazine was or how it's accessible. But just to say that my question for the first issue, why Transcendence? Why starting with Transcendence?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Well, we wanted, because the core team at the time was based in Beirut, so it was me, Ibrahim Name, and Jana Al Obeidyine, were three of us based in Beirut, and we had other team members as well. All of us were based in Beirut at the time. So we thought, what would be a good the process of coming up with a theme is usually taking a dance form and then thinking it through and see what is one of its core essence could be. So we thought, what dance could we think for the first issue that is kind of from the region the magazine is coming out from. So, and the region is the cultural region, not necessarily the geographically, not the borders. So we naturally thought of belly dancing, of dabke, and we thought also of Sufi whirlers, and something just said yes, the Sufi whirling. We were both, Brahim and I, we were interested in it, and we thought it's a very good starting point rather than starting with what everyone expects. Let's start with something that people don't talk much about. And from the Sufi whirling came the theme Transcendence that could go like beyond Sufi whirling, of course. And it did go beyond Sufi whirling, where, you know, transcendence is going beyond something, transcending a state or transcending a border or transcending a problem, like going beyond something. So we thought it was a perfect starting point, and it really expressed where the magazine came from, like where it was born, really. This is what led us to Transcendence, mainly. Thank you for the question, Queen. Thank you for your intervention as well. It was really nice to hear from you and to see you as well. Yeah. So I have a question. Oh, sorry.
No,
you wanted
please.
to say something?
No.
Yeah, I'm really curious to know what do everyone expect from a dance magazine today that does not exist already, like in other dance magazines? What do you think is needed, or what do you think is missing, or yeah, what do you think a dance publication could talk about, like if it's not academic and it's not like about ballet and performance?
Is this question only for the audience, or can I chime in?
Anyone can answer.
I think that I was reading Şebnem's text again after all those years too, and I think both her text and mine are very similar, and I think that's something that a dance mag it brings up more than any other approach to dance, is this idea of dancing as a collective phenomenon, but also a collective need, both in the dancing together, right? I talked about it in my tag, what I was looking for, and I think that it's more than the ketamine and the techno or whatever, is the moving together, and the fact that in that very underground and it wasn't like in a very tiny space, so you had to just yield, right? You had to accept that you were no longer an individual who could move anywhere. You had to follow the flow of people, and when you were dancing, at the same time, everyone had their own space, but we were all dancing together, and there was some. And the same thing in the horror, right? You're dancing together, and there's this social. I want to say function, but that's not necessarily the word. But dancing together has always been a part of human existence, and modernity kind of alienated us from this. And I think what the magazine is trying to do, I don't know if it's conscious or unconscious, is kind of trying to reestablish this connection to dance as a collective phenomenon that is not necessarily performative, and it's hard to classify, but it's something we need, and it's something we've always done, and we're trying to think about ways of reestablishing this connection to movement, and that's what I think is really precious about a dance mag.
Oh, thank you, Gabriel. I think that's a very nice perspective on the magazines.
Also, I can add to Gabriel that dance is not only for dancers. You don't have to be a dancer to dance. It's an experience.
Professional dance.
It's not a identity, kind of.
It's an experience, exactly.
It's kind of one of my biggest takeaways too. It's very much more of a storytelling and bringing us back to places that we don't necessarily hear about. Coming from, I mean, my perspective when I started in periodicals and when I started in dance periodicals, it is so center stage if you want to take it very literally, and it's so mechanical and so much about the performance. And I think one of the biggest strengths of a dance mag is that it really does decenter the concept of dance, and especially, I don't want to keep it academic, but very much also in a colonial sense. It's taking us to Morocco, and it's taking us to Turkey, and it's taking a lot of Western readers maybe to places that they never would have been before. And I think that that's really, 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 really important. It's the decentering of specific voices. And I think a dance mag does it really, really, really well. I'll come back to that point maybe when we get to the third issue. But Transcendence was a great starting point. And I think from our email interview, the decision to use publishers in Hamburg, or the graphic artists in Hamburg, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So you're really transcending those borders and really transporting yourself into, and transporting these stories into a totally different readership realm, which I think is a really spectacular strength of the magazine that I haven't seen from other magazines.
Wow.
Yeah,
Abby,
if I can just, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Gabriel.
Just wanted to add that what's also interesting is that we're not doing like a National Geographic approach to dance. It's not like this imperial gaze, as I forgot the name of the author, but this idea of like we're documenting this dance from this exotic place in the world. We actually received a lot of submissions that were kind of like that, and we had to see if we could. We especially one text was very. We had a lot of debates. This kind of looks like a travel. Like one of those 19th century travel journals from diaries from colonialist perspectives, and we would ask, hey, can you make it less less colonial? Of course we wouldn't say it like that, but it was kind of so there's also this and I didn't even think it's something that is kind of a political mission, but it's just a commitment to depicting cultures and depicting humanity, in general, in a human way, what we understand as human. And also this idea of dancing as not a performance but as movement in general also makes it a lot more universal, because even like I just went to a meditation retreat, and we had to we were like 10 days completely silent, and we had to meditate for hours completely still. We couldn't even move, and we were paying attention to breathing, right? And the magazine came, so many texts came to mind. They shouldn't, because I should be meditating, but I was still thinking of stuff. And the idea of dancing came to mind so frequently, while I was standing still, and yet it was breathing was there, because I was in a state of movement, paying attention to the movement, focusing on movement, which is very similar to dancing. It's when you focus all your attention on movement. So if you see this perspective of dancing is like breathing, anyone can dance, right? It becomes a lot more universal. So I think that's something that this quest for universality, universalism, but at the same time, not a certain kind of universalism that is more linked to colonialism, etc., is something that is always latent in the magazine's process, in my understanding, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would add something also that came to me like many times, and now it's becoming very clear. So there was something uncomfortable with uncomfortable for some of us at the beginning with the idea of contributing to the magazine, people who contribute to the magazine, because usually magazines, what do? They commission pieces. So they ask professional writers to write a story about something. And this approach wouldn't ever work for a dance mag, because precisely because of this, the idea on reporting on dance is totally off when you are talking about dance as an experience, because no one can report on no one's experience. So the words in the magazine has to come from the person experiencing. So this is also a challenge. I think it's not common. It's common in academic writing, but it's not common in magazine and mainstream publication, where people actually report on things or write on things, write their ideas on things, or opinions about things. Like in a traditional dance magazine, they will do reviews. And I came across a magazine that reports actually on dance in other places. This approach, the traditional approach, wouldn't work for a dance mag, because a dance mag precisely try to kind of translate the experience of someone, and this has to come from the person experiencing. And again, those people aren't always professional writers. So this is why the editing process in a dance mag is really where the work happens. It's not in the writing itself, but it's in the editing process where the story actually becomes a story that gets published.
Yeah,
Yes, Colin.
Sorry, excuse me, I'm taking too much space.
Yes.
I'm interested about this editing process, and how do you transform the stories, or how do you transform the texts? What remains from the initial text? What because not only the people who are writing that are contributors, but you are also the contributors in some way.
Okay. I will take on this question before leaving it to. It's yes, Nathaniel. Just a minute. It's actually a learning process for us as editors too. So the editing process goes like this: like, someone has a story that we think is very interesting, but it needs improvement. So we work with the writer to improve the delivery of their message, their story, in their language. But this takes time. This is the problem, that we won't alter anything. We as editor won't change the text, but we will work with the writer. So it's a dance, it's a tango. Really, I mean, the editing process is really a dance too. Like, it's a tango. Like, how can we get the best out of this with you, with your words? So it's a delightful process, but it takes time. This is why the magazine takes time. On top of everything else. If Gabriel and Şebnem would like to add something to this, please do. Before we give Nathaniel yeah. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I remember during the editing process, I always pushed writers to concentrate on experience rather than information or kind of academic way of writing. So concentrate on your experience. What did you see? What did you feel? What is happening there? I remember, and you want them to be clear and not too long, too short, and the usual text editing. But usually pushing to so that they can come up with their experience.
Yeah. I think each one of us has a different style, and we are still learning. It's not that we know what we are doing 100%. It's kind of, we are learning how to get there, like, together also. It's a nice process.
Question? I also ask questions that I want to know. Also,
Yes.
so and sometimes there are very interesting answers to these questions. So
Gabriel?
So I just started last year, and it was my first experience doing in an editorial board of a magazine, or any editorial board in general. So I try to remember what guidelines were given to me when I was writing, right? And it was exactly that. Try to be more empirical, more on your experience. And at the same time, I wanted to add some information in the text, because that was my experience, right? I tried to like right after I had that epiphany I talk about in the text, I started talking to people around me, like, oh my God, this happened, and a friend of mine said, oh, this is ego death, and at some point, it didn't take long, I stumbled upon someone who was very cynical, who just said, oh, this is just drugs, or and that kind of broke me entirely. That moment didn't last for long, but I tried to recover that while writing the text, and that's how I talk about when I get excited. I try to talk. Information is very important to me. So it's kind of like weird to talk about all those references without being academic, because I talk about the history of the internet, and the history of ketamine, and the history of electronic music, but that's me. So I understand that also an intellectual approach is not necessarily the opposite of a more empirical, like experience based, because people understand the world through different lenses, and mine is very intellectual, is also connected to my emotions. So I try to follow this. It's like, is it moving? Is the text flowing, right? It's kind of like, it's a lot based on feeling. So even I think my texts, the texts I chose and I worked on with, are a little bit more academic, or more literary. Even Vinicius' text has a lot of literary references, etc. But I decided to keep those, because let him keep those, because I think it was part of a certain flow. So it's very, it varies a lot. I think
Yes,
it's a lot.
it does.
It's a lot about vibes.
True. It's a dance. It's a tango. Yeah.
Okay, Nathaniel.
Yeah, hey.
Hi.
Hi. So yeah, I'm Nathaniel. I'm based in Brussels, but right now I'm speaking to you from upstate New York. I contributed to the upcoming edition structure, and for full preface, I haven't read any of the other. I haven't read any of the other editions. Um, so full disclosure. For me, there's yeah. I forgot what the original question was that you asked at the beginning of this round of the conversation. Something about, in a broader way, I think you asked, someone asked, what was what can a dance mag do in
Yes.
relationship to other magazines, into this kind of to the broader, yeah. So for me, it brings up this, and a lot of what you were saying brings up. Let's see if I can make it good. Some thoughts around dance, and also the way dance functions and has functioned in the last, let's say, like 10 years, in at least Western, USA, European sort of dance contexts, and let's say dance and like sort of dance performance, dance research, dance studies, and there's a certain I think there's something sort of interesting to me that for example, in the last 10 years, there's really been a crisis of dance, which many people have spoken about, a crisis of dance, which is really related to representation, performance studies, and increasing academicization of dance. In that, to put it very simply, young makers and many different, actually, maybe makers, but especially young makers, are sort of paralyzed in making because of the significance of meaning on what they do and the importance of meaning of what's being said, of dance as language, which is also the performativity of dance, right? So the way that a whole generation is coming into making dances is really through the lens of performance studies, which is thinking about things through representation, semiotics, and reading things through language. And what I really appreciate about what a dance mag, at least from what I'm hearing now, and also what my process was working with Parvati, was right. So the question comes, okay, well, how do you write about dance from the place of dance? And which is also the translation of that is could be also, how do you dance from dance that I've been busy with a lot of other people, like how do you dance, how would one dance, as say contemporary dance, from the place of dance, from the sort of standpoint of dance? And there's very simply to answer my own question is there's something about to dancing within the experience of dance, or writing from the experience of dance. So there's I appreciate that we're a dance mag in resistance to academicization of a field, or of, let's say, of a phenomena, in resistance to the market also, right? Like hiring people to write about something, because you can also say mirroring a certain sociological approach that someone was speaking about earlier, and instead saying, oh no, we're interested in actually a sort of grassroots maybe approach, people writing from the phenomena of dance, and how this produces maybe contemporary subjects, or contemporary lives. And it's interesting, even the fact of making it accessible, again, you can say puts us more towards this sort of standpoint of dance, in a particular way. So there's just something really important about writing from the experience that one's having of the dance, rather than on top of it, or about it. There's something about doing it from, which feels really important.
That's very interesting. I think what I get from it, it's like the academic world has invaded the dance sphere. It's kind of like academia has become the dance performance, and dance forgot what it is. It kinds of we need to make dance remember itself. Kind of. I don't know if I get your point right. But this idea that crossed my mind while you were talking. Did I get you right or no, Nathaniel?
Yeah, in a way, yes. I also think that there's certain conversations that are really important to have in complex academic language. And like, like, I don't, in general, I ideologically, I think, like, some of the most interesting writers I like to read only speak to each other, but what they speak about is the most interesting things, right? Like, and that are really, that have different sort of ways they echo in our lives. I was kind of, but yeah, I think you did get to what I was saying, in terms of, I maybe dance is inherently about the phenomena of movement, right? And so a magazine which is asking people to write from the point of view of experiencing this phenomena is inherently closer to a writing with dance,
Yes, but it also takes you to intellectual places, like what happens with Gabriel, for instance. It's the dance experience that took him to a breakthrough, the intellectual breakthrough. So the dance experience isn't isolated from the intellect. I mean, things aren't isolated from each other. Like, we are beings together.
Yeah, and if I can just add something, I think it's not a coincidence that both texts, both Şebnem's and mine, and many other texts in the magazine, start from this point of view of I was dancing and something happened, or something went through my mind, and here's, it's like it really comes from the standpoint of dancing. And I have to say that I danced through the entire process of writing the text. It was the only way I remember very well. I was like dancing and writing. I was listening to Sophie back then, Allah yarhamha. uh, and I felt the need to, because it's something a lot of people talked about, right? How to write a text that you can dance to or whatever. Uh, but I would dare to say that I was not the only case. Maybe other people do the same thing. It's like, because you're really trying to come from this perspective of like, oh, something happened and I can't really understand intellectually while I was dancing, and here is my I'm gonna try to explain that with just something that is not cannot be really explained in intellectual terms, but you're trying anyway. But the starting point is always the process of dancing itself. Yeah.
And I want to say also, you don't need to dance also to write about your experience. You can be dancing, you can be seeing the dance, but there is an experience there, or you can be researching the dance, but you don't write as an academic researcher, but your experience as a researcher of dance. And you can also write from this viewpoint. And we had some texts from PhD students or researchers, so that's also an experience. As a you can be self-reflexive of your experience as a researcher also.
Yeah. Corinne, I think I saw your hand go up too during that discussion.
I can't remember why, but I think there's a lot of points I'm trying to keep in my mind as you talk, because there's a lot of things that, like bits that are super interesting. I think the last thing that remains with me from what Nathaniel mentioned is, yes, definitely, writing is a skill by itself. Like, to be an articulate writer is a skill by itself. To be an articulate dancer, it's a skill by itself. And then to be writing from dance, that's yet another skill completely. And I think it's yet to be experienced, or to be created, or to be practiced, this writing from dance. Because definitely not all dancers can write, and definitely a lot of people who don't dance write beautifully. But to write from a place of dance is also, I'm, at least in my process, I'm finding it to be a skill to hone for sure.
Okay, I think we're kind of coming closer to the end. Şebnem, do you want to say something first?
Just something short. We also have some poetry in the upcoming issues. So there are other ways of talking about dance also. And I was thinking maybe there might be images also. People can be talking about dance through images also. Maybe in the next issues you can think about it, Jana.
You made me remember, actually, Korean. We had a writer. He's a brilliant writer called Agri Ismail, who wrote what I am calling an experiential review. He's a writer. He's a novelist. So he's a published novelist, and he wrote about his experience of durational performance he saw, what he experienced once. And durational performances are an experience, like it lasts for 12 hours, the performance. So And this is also a piece where really the two skills kind of meet perfectly and beautifully. So yes, it's in the making. Everything we are doing, I think, is in the making.
I have one more question, actually, for you guys. Looking back, what do you think were the biggest takeaways, the biggest lessons learned from the editing process during the first that you wanted to apply going into issue 2?
You are asking about the first issue or the entire?
I'm talking about the first issue, kind of like looking back, like the lessons you learned that you were taking with the, okay, this was a crazy ride. What are we gonna do now to issue 2? Just kind of like a small setup into next week, maybe. Or was it a flawless process?
It wasn't a flawless process, but each issue was an adventure. Each issue brought its own set of challenges that, doesn't repeat, kind of. But if I say what we've learned from the editing process of issue 1, issue 1 taught me so much. It was a very long process. I have to think about it. Maybe next time I will have a clear answer.
Yeah, no, maybe that's a good starting point for next week too. Like,
yes, lesson learned. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to share? Anything about dance coming from this Transcendence Issue?
I want to ask a quick question to Jana. You said it was a Beirut-based magazine. The first issue was Beirut-based.
Yes.
Is it not Beirut-based now? How do you think?
No, it's not. Actually, this is something that became very clear to me through the process of the second and third issues, that I didn't want it to be based anywhere. Actually, it's not what I wanted. I was trying to normalize myself, like to make myself normal, and I'm not normal. So better not to try. I think the magazine doesn't have to be based anywhere. Like this idea of